Right. Yeah, that's okay. I'm good. I've got no sound from you at the moment.
Oh.
Yeah, I can see you. Can you see me?
Let me just sort my mic out. Okay, that should. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Okay, let me just. The mic should be okay now. You should be able to hear me. Hamza, can you hear me yet? Yeah, my mic's working. Okay, inshallah. If Mohib can get his mic working, his headphones working.
Yeah, all good.
All good, yeah, you can hear me?
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah alameen, wa afdalu salatu wa tamu taslim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Welcome to Discourses for this week. Brilliant. Now, it's a bit different today. I thought I'd change it up. And I have Mohib on today. And we're going to have, he's going to quiz me at least on the topic. I've delivered a detailed, lengthy kind of discussions on this already. Some of them on the internet, on the idea of death and dying. And but today I want to change it a little bit and kind of talk about certain aspects, questions that have been asked before. So Mohib has a list of them, and we're going to turn it into a bit of a discussion and make it a proper discourse about the topic itself. Now, I just want to quickly introduce the topic, and then we'll get into the questions. The topic itself is, for most people, it's a very important topic. But however, normally when people talk about it, it's more to do with scaring people into the fear of dying so that they become better, or they just do things that people deem that they should be doing in their lives, and give a better quality of life. However, I don't want to tackle it from that perspective today. I want to talk about it as the core ideas, kind of the nature of death, and also the scarcity of time. That's very, very important as well. In terms of anybody that's trying to link into Zoom today, please, you're going to all have to follow on YouTube because we don't want any disturbance in the discussion on Zoom. So, yeah, go for it, Mohib. Let's begin. Let's start, inshallah.
Yeah, Bismillah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa sahbihi wasallam. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to ask you questions on a topic that I think a lot of us seem to avoid. And that's something that I really want to get in touch with, why we seem to avoid death. Because when I looked at the topic and I saw the poster and I saw the word death there right in front of me, I felt this sort of internal reaction to the word, and I felt just ever so slightly put off from it, and I wondered about that, and I just wanted to ask, where do you think that comes from? Is that something that's inherent in the human being? Are we just automatically sort of disturbed by death, or is that because we don't speak about it anymore?
Well, that's like you started with one of the most difficult questions. Yeah. So, see, death is a difficult one simply because, let me just lay out some principles.
Sure.
The problem is that death is something that's amr ghaibi, and what I mean by that is something that nobody's experienced. It's something that is essentially unseen for everybody, unexperienced. So all of our discussions on death none of them are from experience. So that makes it difficult to begin with. How do we talk about a topic that nobody on earth that's alive has any experience of? That's number one. And that's a huge problem, and that's why everybody has a problem in dealing with it, because one, they haven't experienced it, and two, there's nobody to talk to that has experienced it. In this world anyway. I mean, in the dream, if you want to call it the dream realm, people meet people who passed away, but that's the first problem. The second problem is, historically, the only then source of information we have is either religious or mythological, you could call it.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So those two are the only kind of sources of information about death, or probably the only two sources that discuss death. So obviously religion discusses death. All religions have death as a core kind of discussion. And then mythology, you find all sorts, with Egyptians and the afterlife and the mummifying that's related to that. So and putting goods into the chambers so they have a good afterlife. Or one particular grave that I watched a documentary the other day where they had made him an exit point out of where he was buried, so that's the door I've had to get out. Wow. So I mean, those are the two sources. So that's the first problem we have to deal with. Right. That our anxiety comes from the fact that we don't have no experience of it, or we do not have access to experience.
Interesting.
And that's the first point of that's principle. What we're left with is trust, really, and hope,
right,
and belief. These types of things, belief at the core of them, and then the others from are part of that. So, I think the first part, the anxiety begins or stems from, to begin with, I think lack of knowledge and lack of experiential knowledge.
Right.
Maybe we can start there. Maybe we can build on that idea.
Interesting. So when you say that it's because of a lack of experiential knowledge, is that when we look at the Quran, when Allah says every soul shall taste death, could that also mean that every soul shall experience death? Is that what Allah is saying?
Yeah, because then now we're on to another question, which is, or it's the same idea, the kind of how do we define death in the first place?
Right.
Yeah. Now, in the Quranic narrative, the idea of tasting death is an inference to, of course, that that verse is quite important, what's before and after anyway. It's an inference, or infers the idea that death is maybe misunderstood by most people. Again, it's a source that we have that informs us of an afterlife, So for most people, the fear is that is in lack of definition as well, where we've translated death personally as the end of something.
Right.
It is of life, but if you've only experienced life on this earth and that's about to end, then that seems like an ultimate end, you see. So for most people, be quite scared of that.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody can comment on that verse and kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut, that it would taste death, and look into it, but I don't see it as more complicated than that. That it's just an inference to the idea that it's a momentary experience. So yeah, I wouldn't read more into it than that.
Right. Is death seen as a bad thing? Like, how a lot of people look at death as it's like, oh no, they're going to die. Whereas from the tradition, there are ideas within the tradition that death is seen as a gift. How do we bridge that gap? How do we start to look at death as a potential gift in a way? Because our Western sort of way of living doesn't really think about death very much.
Yeah.
How do we start to look at death as no longer, and we let go of the negative connotations that we have with it?
The thing is, there's an important point here, that see this idea of, for instance, you asking me, how do we deal with the idea that death, or is death a gift? Is death is it good or bad? So, and then me saying, okay, how you deal with it is this. The problem there is there's a problem with that exchange.
The dynamic.
The exchange itself, because it's become transactional. You ask me a question and I say, well, this is the fix for it. Unfortunately, not everything has a fix. And one of them is that, and one of those things is dealing with death. Now, I'll give you an example. I watched, there's a short video. I don't know the link to it, but you may find it on YouTube.
Sure.
It's a philosopher. And this is a philosopher in his university. He was an academic. He was an academic. He was a professor at university. And he even wrote about death anxiety and dealing with it when he was younger. But now what they do is they've got him in a wheelchair, or they're filming him in the last moments of his life. And he's about 90 years old in his house, living on his own. His wife's passed away. And he said something kind of really interesting and profound. He said that, you know, I wrote this book when I was younger, and now I'm seeing death's light in a different way. And I'm thinking, have I missed something? Now, the interesting thing is, even though he wrote about it, he tried to deal with it academically, like, you know, it's going to happen. It's something we can't avoid. There's no afterlife. It is what it is. At the end of his life, he begins to want there to be something else. And he's actually anxious about dying, very anxious. You can see it in his face. After they finished kind of the documentary, he dies like a week later.
Wow.
But what was incredible was that there is no academic answer to it. As much as you convince yourself, for an atheist, that this can happen to me, I have to deal with it. There's something very, very internal that they're fighting, which is nihilism, number one.
Yeah, 100%.
What's the point of anything? But the distress that, and this is it, you know, that it's almost anti-fitrawi almost, you know, the fitra knows there's something else, and they're fighting it to say there's an end. So so that was, I found that to be really, really interesting, that everybody kind of, so when you talk about, back to your question, when you talk about the hadith that it's a gift for the believer, but let's be absolutely honest here. When the Prophet ﷺ is talking about Tuhfatul Mu'min, he's talking more so in that context about what the believer receives in the hereafter.
Right. Okay.
That never takes away the anxiety and the fear element. Because there's reports of Sahaba that were getting close to the end of their lives, and you can, the anxiety is palpable. I mean, in the sense that obviously they're human beings, they're coming to the end of their lives, and there's that slight anxiety. Their belief is firm, it's wathiq, that there's an afterlife, but it's natural to feel like that. It's natural to feel like that, especially for people like us who don't really have supernatural experiences or can experience or confirmation. So when you ask me how do we deal with that, I think everybody's dealing with it. Everybody deals with it in different ways. So I have to deal with it in a particular, I may be able to channel my anxiety in a particular way. So it's very difficult, like when you have to do a khutbah or a talk, and you're trying to say to people, you're definitely something that's, but everybody still feels that anxiety. You're like, I get that, but I'm still like, damn, like, because lack of experience, you don't have any insight into that. So I'm saying that everybody equally feels that anxiety, except different people channel it differently and are able to, you could say their coping mechanisms are different. You could say that certain people have better coping mechanisms with it, and others have, find it very difficult, and it depends on your nature and your temperament and the way you are as a human being as well.
Interesting. You mentioned something very interesting about that philosopher. You said that it was like a nihilism within him. Do you feel as though that within the Muslim community, there's a sense of nihilism as well within the Muslim community that's preventing them from taking the time to read about death or to look into death? Do you think that's a possibility?
I can't like speak for the Muslim community and say I can't make a Muslim community massive at one point. So, but no, I don't think it's nihilism. Nihilism, remember, is the idea that essentially, is life is pointless. That everything really essentially is down to kind of biological. It's down to our survival and reproduction and these things. And if you're going to die anyway, then what's the point of these things? I don't think it's nihilism at all. I think the Muslim community, let's not say the Muslim community. And the reason I'm saying that is because I think everybody struggles with this problem. Yeah, I don't think it's the Muslims specifically. Because let's take the Jews. The Jews have their own, and the Christians have their own narrative of afterlife. So to them, for instance, if you talk to a Christian, they'll say, of course there's an afterlife. And many of them believe in their faith as much as Muslims believe what they believe. You find a Buddhist, he's going to believe his idea of the afterlife probably as much as a Muslim believes in his idea of the afterlife.
Absolutely.
Their level of belief in what they believe in. And if you're convinced at the same level, then you're still dealing with that anxiety. I think the question, if you want to about the Muslim community, that why are Muslims not? I don't know if they're not. I mean, I'm sure that people do. The question is, why do people avoid death or the thought of death? I think that's a better question, probably. I think it's natural, isn't it? If we thought about death all the time,
Yeah.
then it would make our lives miserable to a degree. Because prophets thinking about death is different. When they say, but the Prophet said, I think about death this many times a day. But prophets, it's not that death, thinking of death for them is different. Death is not just a reality, but their confirmation of their ontological confirmations are different.
Right.
The confirmation of reality is completely different to us. Theirs is entirely experiential.
Wow.
So they experience all of these things. So when they think about it, they're just thinking of one reality amongst other realities.
Wow.
And they're not thinking of it as a concept or idea, as a theory or idea of a trust-based idea. And that's why it's not a good idea for many people to constantly be thinking about death, because they'll find it very difficult to live.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
The
They would.
Prophet said, like, remind yourself of the destroyer of pleasures. But those statements of the Prophet are not to think of them all the time, but to maybe do reflect over that daily, maybe once a day, just to reflect over that, to kind of bring you to a realization again. But this obsession with death is not healthy, of course, for normal human beings. It'll make their life miserable, and they may end up, they may fall into nihilism. Some people do that. It happens to me.
What do you think's led to this obsession? What do you think was led to people being obsessive over death in a negative way? It's like one of the questions I have here is it permissible to ask for your own death?
I'll answer that question in a second. What's led to it? I think it's certain people and their experiences, maybe their traumas,
right,
their experiences, or their character. Some people are just very introspective, incredibly introspective, and they think about these things more. It's like anything, isn't it? But some people are asked the really big questions. It's part of their makeup that what bothers them are the big questions, the kind of the cosmic questions.
Sure.
So I think that's based on people rather than why are not all people philosophers? So you see, it depends on. In terms of the other question, can you what was that? Can you ask for death?
Yeah, well, like, what's the permissibility of asking for death?
Well, this is really interesting because it's in the Sunnah tradition, meaning the Hadith collections. This question is there, and so there's a narration of Abu Huraira. And firstly, there's a disclaimer here, and very important. I don't normally answer this question publicly, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Okay. First and foremost, I want to make it clear to everybody that suicide is haram in Islam. Not only is it haram in Islam, that it's something that one should not do. As for one considering, that happens to people.
Right.
I can't judge anybody about what they're feeling or what they're going through. So I'm sure people do experience the feeling, and I'm saying to people that fine, you've experienced the feeling, but please don't do it. Moments. Every new moment is a moment to change things and for your life to change. And I hope that whoever's considering that or in a bad place at the moment, that Allah makes it easy for them and the circumstances become better. I'm nobody to judge that. So Islam entirely prohibits any form of suicide. That's number one. The question you asked was slightly different, and that was that it's natural sometimes for people when they're in such a bad place, they're not going to commit suicide, but they don't want to live anymore.
Yeah.
And there's a narration of the Prophet ﷺ that if that happens, that say, oh God, if life is good for me, then give me life. And if death is better for me, then give me death. And so there is that element there. And Abu Huraira, there's a narration of him about fearing that Dajjal was going to come and fearing that Dajjal would take people's iman away and say, Allah, before the Dajjal comes, Akbid Ruhi. People make a joke of Dajjal coming now, saying, oh, I can't wait, or it's a big topic. But there was Sahaba really worried about it.
Wow.
Incredibly worried that this is an iman snatching entity, you could say.
Wow. That's a really good description. I'll write that down.
Copyright that one. So
iman snatching entity. Writing that down now. It's a good one.
But it is a serious thing because people do feel like, look now, COVID with the lockdown tomorrow.
Yeah.
Some people are really struggling with the idea full stop already. They're already incredibly anxious.
Yeah.
And so
it's a tough one.
It's a really, really difficult one, and we forget sometimes. We forget people's situations. I'll give you an example of that. Like when people are addicted to drugs, like we kind of look down on them, but we don't know the mental trauma that those people have gone through to reach where they're at.
Yeah, yeah,
And
100%.
you should, yeah, and it's such a horrible place to be in that, why would you want to, they take drugs often because they want to just numb the pain of the
Yeah,
circumstance. So we should be very careful about saying things of that nature anyway.
yeah, 100%. What I'm hearing you saying is that everyone's situation is specific to themselves, and we ought to maybe show a little bit more empathy to people and be a little bit more, recognize their situations a bit more.
The way of the believer is empathy. What's happened now, unfortunately, is that the way of the world is narcissism, ostentation, commenting, being controversial. These things are the way of the new world now. The way of the believer is empathy, love, mercy, and being strong when they need to be strong, of course. But attitude towards other people is one of non-judgmental. But we're supposed to be empaths. That's the way of the believer. But unfortunately, people actually think that they can take a fake name and go online and say nasty things to other people and then not be held accountable for that on the day of judgment. It's just very cowardly to do. And how we may affect people's lives, it's even worse than people somebody's face, because you're bombarded, because also negative comments, they start this kind of snowball effect of negative comments online.
Yeah, 100%. And they find that online bullying is one of the leading rising causes to suicide, unfortunately. But you mentioned something very interesting there. You mentioned that the believer is empathic, compassionate. We also said that the believer is also strong. And one of the interesting aspects about death is, whilst we can speak about it personally, I've not experienced it like you've mentioned, but I have witnessed people very close to me dying. I've witnessed people that I've loved passed away. And I know I don't want to make the dynamic sort of asking you how do we manage that, but that's very hard, isn't it? Dealing with the death of those that we love and coming back from that and having that not traumatize us completely, because we live in a society where it's sort of like, well, that person's passed away now, we got to get on with things. What does the religion say about mourning? Does it say anything about mourning?
Interesting you asked that. I was driving today and on the radio, there was a guy, they were talking about checking up on people, that in this period we should check up on people and stuff. So he phoned somebody, he's a radio presenter, and it's an ex-footballer that he phones. And that ex-footballer, I don't know who he is, he lost his son and his mother recently. So, and he said, how are you feeling? And he said, actually, I'm feeling good. And he said, I said to myself that either I sit here and, drown myself in grief, get up and I do something with my life. And really, when it comes to grief, you only have two options. I mean, the religion gives you the 3 days to grieve for a reason, because a lot of people don't realize that, who haven't suffered grief is something you can't control. So when somebody tells you to have sabr, it's just falling on deaf ears sometimes. So it's just an experience that you just can't control it. It's a feeling that is one of the worst feelings in the world. You don't understand how, if you haven't felt it before, you're like, what on earth is this?
Wow.
Well, what is it? It's just like, so, but as you know, that after a few days, that feeling softens because of forgetfulness, and forgetfulness is one of the mercies from God, that He allows you to forget. And that's why even a lot of the experience become less vivid with that person. And in fact, sometimes it becomes like, did the person really exist? Wow. Because it's only in your memory now, you see. That's a mercy from God.
Wow. Yeah.
Deal with it.
Profound.
Yeah. So then you only have two choices. Either you stay in that state, or you do something about it and you get on your feet and you kind of show the other attribute of the believer, which is strength. And quwwa nafsiyya, and this quwwa ruhiyya, like this spiritual strength you show. And what you do is you begin to busy yourself in things that are important. One thing that people tend to forget is that busying oneself is what is from the sunnah, of course, but there's a reason for it, because when you busy yourself and you busy your mind, you don't let the shaitan to enter that your holy space, your sacred space. And that's very, very important. And this is why the scarcity of time thing I put in there, because there's this idea amongst us that we want to do things and we want to free up time so we can relax. That's not what we should be. That's not the way of the believer.
Wow.
Like, what do you mean that? So I want to.
Would you say that's like a Western phenomenon? But is that a new phenomenon? Like, and like it's not.
Well, number one, it's nonsensical, because because kind of this absolute relaxation. Yeah, you can have small periods of it, but I'll give you an example. When somebody binge watches something, there's a point where your soul can't take it anymore. It's like you're sick of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What is that? It's because you're not supposed to be doing so much of it.
Yeah.
There's a part of the soul that needs that procrastination, and relaxation. But then it knows that there's a limit for that. And then it needs to go back that, too much of anything is detrimental to the soul. And so you need to keep yourself busy with, ideas, building things like we've talked about before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Building your akhirah as well. And that can be many different ways, knowing that and we don't have much time. Scarcity of time is unbelievable. We just don't have time. Time is passing very quickly now. And it's lost its kind of blessing through automation, which is the biggest blessing killer.
Wow. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Like,
humans thought that automation was a good thing.
Yeah. But it's not necessarily.
No, of course it's not, because automation it has its benefits, also has its major harms. There's automation where it take mobile phones and take memory. Automation has destroyed memory. How much reliance is there on your memory anymore? So automation has benefits, but then it's very detrimental at points as well. Automation has take your physical body, look at obesity, and look at muscle pain and all these types of things. What hasn't helped that automation? We're sitting all day where we don't move. It's automated, so that doesn't help. And but anyway, that's a separate topic.
But there's this idea of you mentioned the scarcity of time, and the opposite of scarcity is abundance, right? And abundance for me is the idea of barakah. And I remember spending some time with you a couple of years ago, and you spoke to me about there being barakah in time, and that now there's less barakah in our time, and that it's getting lesser and lesser and lesser.
That's my tangible experience.
Right.
It's that's what
I feel it too.
I believe it's tangible though.
Yeah, I feel it too.
Now you could argue that people will say, but no, you know what it is, that we're just doing so much more and having to do so much more. It's because of that. Well, that's that plays part of it. I'm not saying that the nature of time has changed in that sense. Right.
But the experience of it, our potential experience of it.
I think number one, our mindset leads to it.
Yeah.
And our worldview now is completely different. The way we live, the way we plan our lives is completely different to before. So that constitutes a huge part of it. And also, I've been thinking about this for a long time, that we are so when people say often that, everybody's caught up in the rat race, it's not that. It's we're in a system that's so difficult to break out of. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said that. He said that the hadith of the ghuraba, the strangers, that when Islam came, it was a strange thing, and it will be a strange thing again. It will be strange again, and tuba lil ghuraba, and blessed are the strangers, because if you look at and why Islam, of course, we're talking about the core spiritual element of it. It is gharib now, you see, in that sense, when we're talking about about time, scarcity of time, filling our time up with good, spending our time as much as possible. It's scarce now, so it's gharib. But definitely, I think with automation hasn't helped. Industrial revolution didn't help. I mean, don't get me wrong; these things are fantastic. Like, we got laptops and all this stuff, smartphones. But let's be absolutely honest, and we've misused these ni'am.
100%. There's a phenomena. There's a whole community of people called individuals no surf, where they basically say they don't want to surf the internet anymore. And there's a lot of people coming and they're speaking about how massive swaths of time will just be like completely taken away from them, 6, 7, 8 hours, and they don't experience it as 6 or 7, 8 hours. It just completely disappear.
There's a wonderful quote of Susan I don't know, I can't remember her name. The one that wrote, I can see, she wrote, she's a homeschooling woman. Is a Susan Braithwaite her name? I can't remember her name.
The well-educated or the
well-educated
well-trained
mind.
mind.
In the
Yeah.
introduction to the, is it Susan Braithwaite?
Yeah, something like that.
Something
Yeah.
like that. In the introduction to her book,
Mhm.
she talks about time, and she said that when I open up Plato's Republic,
Yeah.
I never look at the time and see, oh no, where did 2 hours go? But checking emails, etc., how often have we looked up and said, where on earth? It's like 4 o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's definitely true. Like my wife said to me yesterday, she said, do you remember a life without internet? I'm like, it's true. Like, do we remember a life?
Wow.
We don't ask that question. What would we do if we switched the internet off? You know,
Right.
I introduced for myself and the students, etc., a few years ago, something called No Wi-Fi Mondays.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important as well. But and people really struggled with it.
Yeah, I did. I struggled. Yeah,
Yeah.
I struggled. There's a massive struggle. You know, it just takes away the time. But am I right in saying that Allah swears by time in the Quran? Is that a correct?
Yeah. Wal asri innal insan.
Yeah.
But asr there means can mean multiple things, and some say it's
Right,
the time
right.
of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that he's speaking about. Yeah. Susan
Right.
White Bauer, that's it.
Yeah.
No Braithwaite came in.
Yeah.
It's an excellent book, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is a lot of people use that surah as a way of saying that, you know, that the human being is in loss, and they relate it to time. They're losing time. Is that correct?
That's one. I mean, yeah. I mean, the Quran has this kind of the infinite meaning idea, doesn't it? So
yeah,
one can
true.
apply it to many different things. Where you have the early tradition of what they understood it to be, and then al-ibra li umum al-alfad la li khusus al-sabab, and we have this ruling that when we look at the Quran, we look at what we take from it is not necessarily why it was revealed, but the generality of its meaning as well.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah, those elements are definitely true. And I mean, let's be honest, we can feel that anyway. It's everybody accepts that human beings are at loss with the moving of shifting of time.
Right.
When you look in the business world. What do they say? They say, you know, invest in yourself. They say nothing is more important and worth more money than your time.
Yeah.
Time is money. Everybody accepts the idea. Like, it's not like
yeah 100%. It's kind of sort of like a universal idea. Like, time is the one thing that you cannot get a return on. Like, at
and the
all.
believers, let's be absolutely honest, there's more kind of emphasis in the Quran that the believer is the one that's more responsible for his time, because God's informed him of that as well. I mean, the single most important thing for us as believers is our time, because we know we've had that information, so we have that source of absolute information that our time is very limited, and we have to account for what we did with our time.
Which is the judgment, where we're on the day of judgment, we're asked what we did. There's a question I wanted to ask, that, well, someone else actually wanted to ask it, and they were like, although that we know that death is something that we've not experienced, but when we die, we're told what happens. What is it that happens after we die, according to the narrations?
Well, I mean, like I said, that particular topic, I did a very long discourse on lockdown on that, but I'll summarize it very quickly. I mean, the fact is that there's a few central points. Number one, that we've really misunderstood the nature of life itself. That's one. This life itself, every night we're reminded that we have very little understanding of life, because when we dream, there's no scientific answer to dreams. I mean, you can check it up, you can read the research, you can read the academic papers. It shouldn't happen that way. Those experiences that we have in our sleep, where we can hear, we can see, we can taste, feel. When you're asleep, bear in mind.
Yeah.
Because they say, oh, but it's your subconscious, and you know, but how neurologically, how is it that we're experiencing things as we're awake?
Yeah, sensory experience.
Yeah, there's no understanding of that sensory experience.
Wow.
And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said that sleep is the younger sibling of death.
Wow.
Bear that in mind. What that means is what we get after death, and sleep is an indicator. The fact that when we sleep and dream, the dream was an indicator of what it's like.
Profound.
Yeah. So, do you see my point? And so we've misunderstood life, because every night we know that we travel somewhere else. We have these experiences, yet we assume that when we're in this world, that's not similar to sleep as well. But it definitely is, because, you know, say all these quotes are saying, Ali, when you die, you wake up. But it's absolutely true, because when you die, that's your first true experience of reality.
Whoa.
Because bear in mind that it's after death is absolute. It's not relative anymore.
Interesting.
And what I mean by that is, in earth, you know, we've got chance to do good deeds, etc. Once you die, it's absolute. What comes after comes after.
Right.
You see, there's no doubts left anymore.
Yeah. It's very interesting.
Now it's experiential.
yeah. Like heaven is absolute heaven, right? It's
not just heaven. Once you die, you taste death. You're now in barzakh. All those questions you had, those doubts, those concerns, that anxiety, it's gone, because you know, wait there, I'm in it now. I've experienced it. So now what comes after is, you've got no doubt about it. It's absolute.
That's mind-boggling.
Whereas in life, it's not. And that's what we've misunderstood. We've misunderstood that this is just a very brief moment for all of us. And that we need to stop getting caught up in it. That being caught up in the world is just a huge distraction.
Right.
We have to accept that the world is a distraction. You know, if we don't accept that, even if we have dreams and we work towards things, they should be worked towards things as a means to something else. But that kind of underlining idea is very important, that we as believers have definitely forgotten that it's no different to the dream world in that sense.
Wow, that's profound.
And when you die, that's it. It's it, man. It's absolute. You're gonna be no more doubts, no more what's gonna happen next, no more, you know, can somebody come back and tell me? And so therefore we need to take life a bit more seriously.
Absolutely. You mentioned the barzakh. What is that? Is that like a plane, a dimension, a realm?
I would say that it's similar to the dream world in a sense.
Is it cohabited?
The word barzakh is not an Arabic word. It's
wow.
In fact, its roots are unknown. It's differed upon. Was it Syriac? Where does it come from? It's not an Arabic word. Like many words in the Quran are not Arabic words. So
wow.
Or there's a group of words that are Arabic words. So
is it cohabited, the barzakh? So is it when you go there, there are other people there as well?
It's assumed so, yeah. So that, see, the barzakh, the hadith on barzakh there are many of them, and they infer slightly different things sometimes. So barzakh is a place. I would call it's like a world, in the sense that we live in a world. In the sense, when you're dreaming, you're in a world, and you're in a place, a realm. So it's a realm that you will exist in for a period of time. The nature of that realm is unknown to us.
Wow.
But it seems to be an experiential realm, definitely, that you experience things in. How you experience things is unknown, i.e., do you experience hunger in barzakh? We don't know that really.
Sure.
Do you experience those types of things? Do you experience fear? And we know that you do experience some things, like we know fear is experienced in barzakh. We know pleasures are experienced in barzakh. Happiness is experienced in sadness, because that's why punishment is in barzakh as well.
Interesting. So there is a punishment in the barzakh as well.
Yeah, this is what the punishment of the grave, etc., talks about, doesn't it?
Oh, interesting.
So those things are they're clearly in hadith, but beyond that, and you know, there's no exact, absolute kind of list that I can give you that you will experience all these things or experience those things.
Yeah.
So that's now very interestingly, Abdul Aziz Dabbar, he describes it like this. He says it's like a upside down pyramid.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, triangle, sorry.
Right.
And so, like one of those funnels you get.
Right.
So and the top is expansive and the bottom is very tight, and you know, like those diet plans.
Yeah.
And the bottom of it is full of the bad people.
Okay.
And an area where it's inhabited by bad people. And the further up you get, the more blissful it becomes. And
the more expansive, by the looks of things.
The more expansive, exactly.
At the bottom, it's constricted.
That was an experiential thing that he had. Yeah,
Well,
really
yeah,
interesting stuff about barzakh. Take a while to
yeah,
go through. But
yeah. Well,
so barzakh is
yeah,
you meet other people. The hadith about that, meeting other people,
interesting.
conversing with them. But like I said, like there's no discussion. Do you sleep in barzakh? There's no discussion on that. What does
Mm,
relaxation mean? Are you worried about people on earth? There's some
mhm.
indications there in hadith literature.
Wow.
Those things are something that we have yet to experience truly, and we'll find out after. It seems.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned that was profound, mind blowing. It's interesting. You mentioned Sheikh Abdulaziz at the Bab, and it just reminded me that I didn't ask the question on. There's an ayah in the Quran that speaks of the awliya and that they do not have fear.
لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. Yeah.
Yeah. Does that also relate
Well,
to
somebody asked a question here. They put it from YouTube. Hamza, put any other questions from YouTube on, please, as well.
Yeah.
That Sheikh Ibrahim al-Yaqubi,
Mhm.
rahimahullah, had insight of his death 6 months prior to dying. Having that insight, will it ease the process of dying, or will the anxiety inevitably be there? Well, I mean, I couldn't answer that question because I haven't had that 6 months. So I can't answer that question, but I don't know. I don't know if did it ease. Well, he was, Sheikh Rabbani and rahimahullah. But this is not unusual. I mean, many shuyukh have been reported, you have reports of, them realizing that they're going to die sometime before they die. You have these reports all the time.
Yeah. Sheikh Ahmed Alawi, right?
Yeah, Sheikh Ahmed Allawi, and that's documented by a non-Muslim.
Mm,
So, Dr. Kerry. So, you have, this is documented. I mean, there's masses of literature about that, about this idea that, and they die at that, like, not maybe that minute or, that prescribed time, but in and around, it seems that they end up dying. So, the Prophet ﷺ, of course, and prophets have that knowledge, don't they, where they tell people they're going to pass away, and or they get indication about that. When the Prophet ﷺ would say about somebody that may Allah have mercy on him, they would realize that the person's going to die.
oh
So,
gosh.
yeah, or things of that nature. So that's interesting. Yeah. So I don't know about the verse of the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
I've been thinking about that for a long time. I'll be honest with you. That is that what Allah is talking about? La khawfun alayhim wa lahum yahzanun, that they don't, because we know people of God feel sorrow. They feel huzn, don't they? Of course they do. When their relatives pass away, prophets feel that when their relatives pass away.
Yeah.
But what does Allah mean by, there's no, they don't feel this anxiety, khawf, fear, nor this huzn, sadness. And I think that's more related, more related to kind of what normal people feel sad about, or the loss of things that, and they actualize death, of course, better than people, normal people. They'll grieve based on the sunnah, and then they'll let that, and that's what it may mean, this consistent idea of, but khawf definitely, but they don't fear, meaning they don't have fear of loss and fear of these types of things, because they've maybe understood the reality of life and what it actually is. But that's not to say that there's not that natural response to it.
Interesting. Right.
Say that at all.
Yeah. But there are some certain individuals like the story of Sheikh Alawi. He says to the doctor, "I'm going to die this time, Ryan. Please don't put any injection in me. I just want to die."
He wanted to die. It's quite clear that, meaning that he was very ill anyway. But he said, "I want to meet my Lord."
Oh wow!
But that's a lifetime of when he died at 63.
Well, he died at 63. That's
63 years old.
Considerably younger than I thought, actually.
Yeah, Sheikh Aliwa. So he is 60, 63. He looked older, but he was a man that dedicated the latter part of his life, probably 2.5 decades, to absolute kind of dedication and devotion to God in silence, almost. So a man daily who submits to God and attempts to remember him pretty much for those 24 hours. And that's all he's concerned about. Of course, he'll get to a point where he wants that actual experience and wants to meet his Lord. So I get that.
Yeah, 100%. Profound. There's one question left on my sheet of questions.
We'll wrap up in 6 minutes. So let's get the last ones in. I'm sorry, if there any on YouTube, just throw them in.
So you mentioned that death has its links to hope, and that we hope that there's a good ending, that we have a good ending, and we hope that after death is good for us. But there's also this idea of blameworthy hope. And I just wanted to ask for myself as primarily is, how do we know the distinction between the hope that's blameworthy and the hope that's actually rooted in something?
It's a brilliant question. I mean, there's a different word for it though. There's hope is raja in Arabic, and what you're talking about is what they call tulul amal. That's different. So the ulama say that's a bad thing, tulul amal. And tulul amal is this idea that all these plans that you have in mind, you have a hope in that they will come to fruition.
Oh God.
Yeah, and if they don't come to fruition, therefore you'll feel very upset about them. And it's this idea that I'm definitely gonna, I'm planning and I'm definitely gonna live to that point. So that's the idea of tulul amal. Raja is different. Raja is this idea that I'm gonna do my best, and I hope that Allah has mercy on me. It's slightly different. Tulul amal. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya rahimahullah in his Madaris Salikin has a whole section on it about this idea of tulul amal. These kind of long, kind of hopes that we have so much conviction. That this is going to really turn to gold. When it doesn't, then it really, really affects us. That's completely different to the idea of raja. And raja is the opposite of khawf, which is fear. These words are different in Arabic, the way they're used as well. So that's what's kind of blameworthy, this tulul amal with the hamza. This idea of having these, and we know what that is. Everybody's experienced it. Where you know what I mean. Inshallah, and when it doesn't happen or doesn't come to fruition, we're like, oh, did I waste my time? And did I, it's the idea of investing kind of mental power into something without, when in reality, its outcome is really down to God. And we're sure that us as autonomous beings really have the power to affect that affair. For instance, I'm going to save up for 5 years and then I'm going to buy this. And so you work and work and work. And then when you realize actually you can't buy it because you don't have enough, whatever it may be, you're broken about it. And that's a problem, because what you've done is you planned for something essentially that you didn't have control over. That's not to say you don't have good planning mechanisms in place. And management skills. I'm not saying that. But we know when that's blameworthy. Allah mentions it in the Quran. Allah says, الَّذِي جَمَعَ مَالًا وَعَدَّدَهُ يَحْسَبُ أَنَّ مَالُ أَخْلَدَهُ. Allah says he gathers his money and he keeps counting it mentally. If I have a bit more, then I'm gonna. And then he says he thinks his money will allow him to live forever.
Wow, it's linked to temporality. Yeah. Wow, it's profound.
To take this question, how do you interpret your own dream, death in a dream you had from the Quran and Hadith of scholarly works? You don't really. That's dreams are something that it's best just to, in most cases, ignore them, because people they look too much into dreams, I feel. And if you die in your dream, that doesn't mean you're going to die in real life, of course. But the Prophet ﷺ said, if you have a bad dream, do not share it, and then give some sadaqah for it, and that may become a dafi'ul bala for it. It may push away the harm, inshallah. Don't get caught up, because I know people who get so caught up in dreams and their interpretation of what they mean that it becomes to really affect their lives. So be careful of that. I'm not saying dreams don't have truth in them, but it's very difficult to decipher. Like there's a guy sits on TV and people phone in and this was my dream, and he opens a book that was attributed to Ibn Sirin that he never wrote. And I saw a sandal in my dream, a brand sandal, and he says, well, that means not this. I mean, wallahi, like stay away from that stuff, because dreams are like that. A man came to Ibn Sirin, and Ibn Sirin was, in Imam Malik's time, he's one of the Salaf, early Muslims, and a great man of God. And he would interpret dreams, and he told him a dream, and he said, you'll be going on Hajj next year. And another man came and told him the exact same dream, and he gave a completely different interpretation. We showed you that it's not just the dream, it's more than the dream. It's maybe he had some firas and saw into that person something that everybody else couldn't see. I recommend people stay away from that.
I have one more question from someone. How can we better understand our temporality?
Sorry, say, how do we better understand our
temporality?
By looking at our weaknesses, for one.
Wow.
The fact that how incapable we are of even controlling our own bowels, so at times, when we get older, my grandfather, rahimahullah, when he's passing away, I was nursing him. He was, I had to look after him. I had, by looking after him in everything. And he just looked at me and he said, this is what the end is. And, so a man so powerful, so big, so strong. But the reality is that God shows you that you don't really, you're ajiz, you don't have power. So you always have to remember that, who do we think we are? God constantly says in the Quran, who do human beings think they are? Like by realizing our powerlessness, adds to that focus on temporality, that look, life is temporal here. We don't have the answers to everything. We don't have the power to do everything. And we should kind of stay in our lane to a degree and be a little more humble. Humility does help that. So definitely that would be a good reflection, I think. How do you classify a friend of God? Very difficult or not. Does a missed prayer not put them in that category? I don't understand the last part, missed prayer. Not put them in that category. No. A friend, well, he can make tawbah. Like a friend, there's no such thing as, the word friend is the wrong word, incorrect translation of waliullah. Waliullah, the word wala in Arabic means guardianship. Awliya Allah, the people who essentially have been given agency. I got like a wali of a girl is her father that is responsible for her. That makes sense. These people are given a set of kind of a spiritual responsibility, I would say. So guardians, I call them.
Interesting.
Guardians of the galaxy. Yeah. The real ones.
What's the Arabic word for Gnostic? What would that? Is that a different classification of people? Like Arif Billah or something like that?
Remember what Gnostics are? Gnostics
from Christianity, right?
To the church, yeah.
Yeah.
And about a particular type of monk.
Yeah.
And the ones who documented the Bible and the Dead Sea Scroll and the Gnostic Bible and there's a kind of in the Western world, Gnostic has a very specific meaning.
Did you think that word sort of like possibly leaked in?
By Gnostic, I don't know. Gnostic, they mean, I don't know. It's difficult. You have to unpack every word anyway. But by person of God, for me, it's just somebody who is in tune with, that channel. And by somebody doesn't lose their relationship with God by making a mistake. All of the sons of Adam sin, and the best of sinners are the ones who make tawbah. So a mistake is God can forgive it and raise your rank again. So we shouldn't think like that. People of God are not sinless always, but they asked Imam Junaid, can a wali commit zina? He said, anybody can commit zina, but a wali, we hope that he makes tawbah al-fawr, like he just gets on with the tawbah.
SubhanAllah.
So it doesn't work like that. I don't like this topic where who's the man of God, who's not a man of God. That's not for us to determine. What's to determine for us is, are we people of God, and shouldn't we be trying to attempt that?
Yeah.
Other people, they can answer for themselves. This kind of wali hunting is a problem as well. They find the men of God, and then when they find one they think is a man of God, and then he's pulled up for a scandal, then all their hopes and everything drops because they put all their faith into this man. The only perfect human being is the messenger of God, alayhi salatu wasalam. There you go. There's your insanul kamil. Everybody else tries their best. Remember, people get currency when they die. What did Biggie say? You're nobody till somebody kills you.
Yeah.
I mean, the point is that, what I mean is, like, dead people have much more notoriety. Like, you see my point?
100%.
So don't worry. When you pass away, I'm sure people will say you're a wali as well. The point is that it's very difficult to gauge a man of God, who he is. Some people we can. It sometimes takes a lifetime to live with people to work out the men of God. We don't even know it. It's hidden from us. And people like the great shuyukh, people lived with them all their lives and they documented, but we know that because people lived with them all their lives. It's difficult to just meet a man with a white beard or something and, that's a man of God. We don't know. We have to experience these things and live with them. And sometimes the people that we never think would be the people of God, men and women of God, are men and women of God, and they were never. It's not supposed to be like that. Tajuddin Subki says, "A wali man lam ya'rif wilayatahu." A wali is he does not know he's a man of God. They don't assume that about themselves. For us, like I said, we have to have good company with these people, definitely, or seek company with these people. Don't put all your hopes in this kind of chasing the idea that I need to meet men of God, and who's going to define that for you? That's what your question is. Very difficult. It's very difficult to define that. Not impossible.
Profound. I got another question. Are there any specific du'as for a good ending?
Yeah, there's loads. I mean, in the Sunnah, you know, I mean, you can check that in when you're in a class or something.
Yeah.
Ask your teachers. And the reason I say that, and I leave it at that, and it's interesting why I'm saying this, that why have I not just given an answer here?
Yeah.
Well, you should all be in classes. That's why. You should all be learning. You know, when people ask me questions, often now I have a different response because I'm like, ask your teachers, and we don't have any, but you should. Because why are you not in classes? Why are you not learning? You know, this is the whole thing that we're trying to build, this idea of tradition and having teachers and asking them in class in that environment. Islam has become too haphazard. It's too send me a word over on WhatsApp, or do you know a hadith for this? No, if you're in those circles, you know, learning, then you'll be learning things as you go along. But when you give up learning, then I believe that people don't have the right often to just access knowledge that quickly.
Right. Yeah.
Sacrifices for that. You need to, you know, Nawawi it didn't take him a day to author Kitab al-Adhkar, you know, full of sunnah du'as. Go out there, get in class, and those answers be accessible for you. Knowledge is so accessible, man. So fix up that, you know, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yeah. We'll take one more and then we'll wrap up, inshallah.
None from me.
Concluding kind of maybe comment.
None from me. All my questions are done.
Yeah. So today we changed it up a bit. I wanted a discussion and discourse. I did last minute Muhib though, like really last minute. And so, you know, I appreciate time and everything. So, and inshallah, with the discourses, we will be we'll be introducing other guests, inshallah, who I've talked to, getting them on as well. And hopefully today was a discussion. And what I really want to get to is these important questions. And hopefully our discussion, our discourse has led to reflection. That's all I hope. And a deeper reflection. And if we can share things that allow us all to collectively reflect and make us deeper people, people of depth and inner work and introspection, I think that we've achieved a lot, you know, inshallah. So we'll stop there. Thank you for everybody for tuning in. I'll see everybody next week. Thank you, Muhib.
Thank you. Honor's all mine.
Allah give you what your name entails, inshallah.
I mean, I hope.
I'll see everybody next week.